Hello, Ken Spriggs here, continuing my build of the child from the Star Wars Mandalorian, the NY3Dcreations 3D printed model of him with the crib. Coming along very well, and I'm going to get him completed up and ready to go. There is a convention coming up here on Saturday. Today is actually Wednesday. So this Saturday, March the 7th, I believe. March the 7th, sorry. Here in Indiana, I live in Indiana. It's in Indianapolis. It's the IPMS Regional Convention. So I'll be heading down there, taking several of my kits, including the child, which will be done. I won't have the larger Mandalorian done, obviously. I'm still going to be working on that in the future. I'll also be taking down the Mandalorian small figure that I printed, as well as some other kits, my Invisible Man and my Thing from Another World. So very excited about that. I did want to mention something and just kind of put out some information. I know sometimes it seems like I announce that I'm going to do a kit, and then it kind of veers off and I don't finish the kit, or I kind of go away from it. Mainly right now, the one I had started was the little tiny Jupiter 2, which I do want to finish at some point. But for different reasons, sometimes my plans change. In the past, sometimes a kit would stop being worked on because I reached some kind of a wall or a barrier, or it just wasn't clicking or getting it right. It wasn't really the case this time. What had basically happened was I started looking into the 3D printing, and really hadn't planned on getting a 3D printer until I started looking at them in like November or December with my tax return coming up. And once I realized how inexpensive they are and I could get one reasonably priced, that just sort of opened the door. And then that brought out the idea that I was going to make the Mandalorian. And I had also bought the Child, which I wanted to work on as well, which I am working on. And then there's some other kits. Well, at least one other kit that I've seen, I actually purchased of the Razor Crest from the Mandalorian, and I'm going to be working on that a little bit too. So I just want to keep my creativity fresh and branch out into other areas like the 3D printing. So I certainly will return to the Jupiter 2 and to some other kits that I started in the past. But I have been very prolific in making a lot of kits lately, which I'm really happy with and really excited with. So, but keeping my creative juices flowing and learning new things really keeps this hobby alive and enjoyable for me. So I hope you'll bear with me. Hopefully I'm giving you some very interesting kits to see and some processes to see. And so there is kind of a method to my madness oftentimes. But I hope that I'm not frustrating anyone by having a kit or so hanging out there, because I will return to them. But for now, let's go ahead and work on completing up the Child, and we'll see how that turned out. All right, so I got a final coat of the Rust-Oleum gray filler sandable primer onto the crib, and it looks really good. It's a nice smooth finish. I did go ahead and put a coating on the inside, which looks pretty good. I might have to do a little more cleaning up on that, a little bit of seams. I cut off those connectors and tried to sand them as smooth as I can to the surface and glued those in place since I'm not going to be using those for the crib top. And then I got an initial coating of the primer on the outside of the crib. Needs to be sanded just a little bit, a few rough spots on it, and do another final coat on that. I still have to do something on the inside. What I want to try to do is, there's no detail on the inside of this, but there should be right here and right here. They should look like these, like this is continued on the inside. So what I want to do is just cut out a piece of styrene that matches these openings and just glue that on the inside right behind these little parts here. Just down to this edge to make it look like it has some detail on it, like it goes down into the crib. I have to cut off the rest of these connectors that I'm not using, just sand those smooth. And then one other thing I want to do is, looking at some stills, the crib kind of has some pistons that come off of these, and they go up to like about here. So it kind of looks like they would operate and open and close this lid kind of thing. So I'm just going to use some tubes, styrene tubing, and just fashion those once I get this cleaned up. And I haven't put any primer on the inside yet, but I'll go ahead and get that worked on as well. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to follow a little tip that Augie Gonzalez from Interstellar Modeler used on his recent build. Check out his build, which I linked in my last video. And he painted it with the silver metallic first, and then he put over some liquid mask medium and some spots in order to have it look like there's some metal showing beneath it. So what I thought I would do is use the same idea, but instead of just like some silver paint, I'm going to use a little bit of a thin coating of some Alclad, some aluminum. I don't want it to be real shiny and look real obvious. I'd rather have the dull aluminum. So what I'm going to do is get a coat on this, and once I get this, I won't do this right now, but I'll come to this later and do the same thing. And just on the bottom, I want to put on the black gloss coat for Alclads, and then I want to put some of the aluminum and get that on there and let that dry totally. Once it does, then I can use some micro mask and just put some blobs here and there and make some different parts that will look like the top white coat is peeled off and you're seeing the aluminum underneath it. So okay, so let me go ahead and start getting this painted. All right, so after getting a coating of the gloss black from Alclad, here's their gloss black base. And I let that dry. I showed in the previous still. I went ahead and put a coating of the aluminum. Let me find that here real quick. Sorry about that. There we go. Just regular aluminum. They have a bright aluminum, like a shiny aluminum. They have a bunch of different kind of metals, but I use just a plain aluminum. It gives it a little more dull finish. It is shiny to some degree, but it's mostly just supposed to be like a flat aluminum. And then once that dried, as you can see, I put some micro mask in different spots along the edges and some big blobs on the bottom. I went back and did a little bit of pieces of tape because I'd missed a few spots, like on these ones here. I was thinking of leaving these metallic, but I went ahead and looked at the stills again, or looked at the show again, and they're really not. They're white, but they do have some metal showing through. So it's like the whole thing was aluminum, and then they just coated it with like a ceramic white or something, which got all chewed up and beat up and dirty. So, okay. So at this point, I'm ready to go ahead and get a coating of white over top of it. And I'm just going to use the white Tamiya fine surface primer, since that's not going to be my final look anyway. And then I'll have to put like a satin coat over it so I can do some weathering, and then I'll end it off with some pastels once I remove these masks and everything. So all right, let me go ahead and get a coating of white on that, and then we'll be ready to go ahead and start getting that weathered up. All right, so a little change of plans. I decided to go instead with this Duplicolor Polar Arctic White, which I happen to have sitting around. I looked around, and it's a glossy coat, So I figured I would save some time with having to put some gloss on it to do some weathering. Now, this is kind of a car color, a car enamel. So at first it sort of reacted with the Alclads, I guess, and there were some dark spots and they were more pronounced, which actually works in my favor because it makes it look dirty and speckled and parts that are damaged. So I kind of like that. Once I put an initial coat, I let it start to dry, and then I went ahead and put some more on and tried to cover most of it, but I like it being patchy like this. So I think that's going to be cool. And plus it's glossy, so once it dries, I can do some weathering with some oils, and I can take off the micro mask, and then also use some pastels and ultimately put a flat coat over the whole thing to dull that down. So, but I think that's going to work just fine. So let me just let that dry, and then we'll see how that turns out once I take the masks off. All right, so I removed the micro mask, and so far those look pretty cool. You can see the clad aluminum shining through. It looks like real metal. Looks pretty cool. And I'm going to blend those together with a combination of oils and some weathering powders from Tamiya, so that it'll look a little more natural. But I really like how that paint turned out with the speckles and the blemishes. It looks like pock marks. So that worked out in my favor. Certainly if I were making a, smooth, new looking item, that would have been a problem. But in this case, it worked out great. Not sure why the automotive paint reacted with the Alclads. Not really sure. Rather strange. Or maybe the Alclads reacted with that paint, or it was older. I don't know. But anyway, it worked out and it looks good. Gives it a nice worn and blemished look to it, and it's all beat up. And it just has that nice semi-gloss, so I can put some oils over it and they won't sink into it, so that'll be good. All right, so I did a little bit of work on the back of the carriage. I cut out some pieces of styrene stripping, and I just happened to have some that had these little fine ridges. I don't know if you can see them, but I basically just measured off what these look like and cut them out in styrene and glued them inside. And then I put this strip of styrene underneath to kind of separate the bottom of this carriage from the top, because there is a separation. So, and then I sanded off those two nubs there, this one and this one over here. So those are gone. And then right now I'm just working on those little pistons that are going to go from the backs of these up to the carriage. I got to look at some pictures and see where those go to, but I think it's sort of like right up to like here, which is nice that I have that piece of styrene stripping. It'll give it a nice piece to hook onto and make it look like it's actually attached. So, okay. All right, so I painted the inside of the crib. Excuse me. I used some, let's see here, flat brown for the main dark parts. I used some chrome silver on those little pipes in the back, whatever those are. I used some metallic gray for the insides of these mechanisms. For the blanket part, I used khaki. It's kind of a different brown tone. And then I used the Alclad's aluminum over top of those little squares to give it a kind of a metallic look. Now, since I didn't have a black behind it, it didn't give me the same kind of sheen, but it does look metallic, so it's kind of cool. And a little bit of highlighting, dry brushing on those two little parts there with some metallic gray as well. And then on the sides, I used just some yellow for now. I know they're supposed to be orange, but Once I do the oils on this, I'm going to use, let's get that there. Where is that? Oops, sorry about that. I'm going to use ochre, which is an orange color. That way I can get kind of an uneven tone on it rather than just painting it orange and looking flat. And I'll do a little bit of oils over top of the interior as well, just to give it kind of a wash. But that's looking pretty good. All right, so that's just about done except for the final weathering. And then I have to do the top, the back of it. And then just onto the child. And that'll wrap up him for now. Obviously, I'm going to be working on a large 18-inch Mandalorian to go with him. But for now, that'll finish him up. And then I have to do the other version of him sitting up, doing the Force. But I want to at least get this finished and get him painted and get in there. There is a convention coming up in Indianapolis. It'll probably be upon us by the time I get this video completed. It's on March the 8th or the 7th, I believe. It's Saturday. For me, it's next Saturday. While I'm filming this, it's still Sunday, so I want to get this finished up. So I can at least take this with me to the convention, and I'll just maybe put some metallics on the stand that it came with and just stick it on there for now. And then work on the rest of it later. So, all right, but looking fantastic. All right, so I got the gloss black onto the top of the crib, and then the alclad aluminum, and I masked off the bottom of the inside because that's going to be a light brown. And then instead of using liquid mask, I didn't want to have to wait for that to dry, so I just cut up some tape. Just put some down on the cutting board and just cut some little ragged edges out of it. Wrapped it over some of the edges. And it doesn't have to be perfect. As long as I can remove it and it pulls off some of the paint, that's all I care about. So I used a little bit on the main part of the crib as well. So, okay. So all I need to do is go ahead and get on a coating of my Duplicolor Polar Arctic White. And hopefully it does the same spotting thing, and then we'll finish up this crib. All right, it's little baby Yoda, the child's coming together nicely. I got some brown on his blanket, a little bit lighter shade. I used the, let me see here. Yes, the brown JGSDF on his blanket. And then I mixed a little bit of that with some of the khaki. So it wasn't quite a stark difference for the top of the blanket. So it's very similar in color. I used a deck tan right there for his collar on his outfit, which you just barely see. Make it lighter. And then I took some flesh and I thinned it down really greatly. Put a little heavier inside his ears and then really thinned it out and just kind of washed it out coming out of his ears. And I'm going to be doing washes on the head at least and his hand in order to make them look more uneven and realistic. The blanket, I used some Tamiya pastels. I have the mud, light sand, and sand colors, and I just kind of brushed those onto the blanket. Some darker down into the folds and lighter up on the edges, so it will give it that kind of a dirty, worn look. And I think it looks pretty cool. So the blanket I'm probably going to leave just as it is for now. We'll see. And I started on his eyes. I took a little bit of white and just mixed in just the tiniest bit of some brown, which I had on this palette right here. And I made the white part of his eyes, and I just kind of did around the outer edge of it. And then I took some gray green, gotta be careful here, and I mixed it in with some black right there in the end, you can see, and then painted in his big old pupil. I'm not done with that. Once that dries, I want to put in some other lighter colors to give it some contrast, and then I'll finish up the whole thing with a gloss over top of it to make it look shiny. But it certainly starts to bring some character out to him, so he's coming along nicely. I don't know if I had mentioned the really pale green, which again I'm going to use some washes on and some oils. I had some that I had mixed up back when I built my little mini Spindrift, and I made the Aurora green for the plastic, and it's a really light pale green. So I still had a bunch of that, so I airbrushed that onto his head and his hand. I airbrushed the blanket brown part after I masked it off, and then I just used a brush on the rest of it. So, okay, so he's coming along nicely. Should have him done very shortly. And I have the lid to the carriage, to the crib, drying back there, looking all chewed up and beat up. So very close to finishing this up, and at least wrapping up the child for this part of the build. All right, so I glued on the back of the crib. Got a nice solid fit there on the inside. I made those little pistons that I was talking about. I think I talked about earlier. If you look in some of the stills, there are two pistons coming up, kind of suggesting that that inner part opens and closes, but I don't think they really do. Because in the show, when we see this crib, there are sides that come up from either side here and open and close. We don't ever see this close down onto it. So, and really the crib only lasts, I think, 2 episodes, and then it's in the garbage. And then later they make another one in the last episode. So, spoiler, sorry. But I got that done. I got the brown inside there. I got all the detail looking really good. So that looks great. I got that orange there. I don't know if I went over that, but I painted it with a flat yellow Tamiya. And then when it was dry, I went over it with some ochre orange Abtalung oils and let that settle a bit, and then I brushed them down a bit so it just looks natural. And it looks uneven, which is what I'm going for. That's kind of the purpose of the oils, to get those to make that look good. So, all right, so the crib is all done. We just finish up the child and we'll wrap up this part of the build. All right, so I finished the final detailing on the child, and mainly what I did is for his eyes, I took a little bit of clear green and clear yellow, and I kind of dabbed them around the edges and a little bit towards the center and put some marks on it. And then it didn't look quite right, so I took some more black, just plain black, and dabbed it in the middle to make like a separate pupil. And then once that was dried, I put a coating of Tamiya gloss clear onto his eyes. Got a nice glossy finish, and that really kind of brings it together. So I think he looks pretty cool. On his head, I went ahead and used some oils, some Abtalung 502. I used mostly the olive green, which I thinned out to different thicknesses. A little bit of the light gray to give it some tones, and also for his nails on his hand. And I put the oils on a little heavier, and they went into a lot of the creases, and then I just kind of toned them back a bit. And then when that was done, I went over it with some weathering powders from Tamiya. I just used the white, the snow, so it wouldn't change any of the colors. And I didn't really have any greens, so I've done that a lot lately with the oils to take down the glossiness of it, kind of make it look more natural and more even. So I think that makes him look really cool. So he turned out really well, really happy with him. I still have to finish the other version of him sitting up using the force, but I will worry about that later. I mainly wanted to get him done in time for the convention on Saturday down in Indy. So I might also play with the idea. He does have some fuzz along his ears and his head. I've been playing with an idea of maybe using like little tiny bits of cotton. See if I could paint those first and maybe see if they stay together and then maybe glue them down. I'll experiment on something else first before I do that. But for now, I'm going to pretty much call him done. And let's go ahead and get him in his crib, and we will show off the final build of this version of the child. All right, and here is the finished child inside his beat up crib. I think he turned out really, really well. And his crib as well, looking nice and chewed up and destroyed. And I put those little teeny pistons in there, as you can see. I just took a piece of styrene tubing and a piece of styrene round stock and glued it together. I painted metallic brown on the bottom and just chrome silver on the top, or I'm sorry, I think it's gunmetal on the top. And then just glued them on with some 5-minute epoxy. You can see them in the actual crib if you get the right screenshots. I don't think the colors are necessarily correct, but I'm not worried about it. But you have that brown section in the back. You have the white section inside and at the top, and the looks like it's actually lowered down into it so that these slots continue on down into the actual crib. All right, so turned out fantastically. I'm very happy with it. So I'm going to call that, well, other than maybe a little tweaking, I'm still playing with some ideas about how to maybe put some fuzz on his head, maybe with some cotton or something, and see if I can spray paint it with some green and maybe just dab it on his head with some glue or something. We'll see. I want to play with that a bit. This build is not complete. He's pretty much complete, but I'm going to be doing the larger Mandalorian, as I've said before. So that'll be continuing working on it, but I'm going to call him done for now. I still have to do the other version of him sitting up and using the force, and I'll just paint him in the same way. But yeah, he's looking pretty cool in his little chewed up crib. All right, so stay tuned. I will be continuing this build and working on the Mandalorian, the large version of him as well. All right, so that's going to go ahead and wrap up this video for today. What I'll probably be doing, and we'll see, I haven't been to the convention yet in Indianapolis, so I'm not sure how large of a convention. I'll try to take some pictures of it and maybe a little video, that sort of thing. So it's a new venue for me. So most likely my next video will be some footage from that after I get it all set up from over the weekend. So stay tuned, and then we'll be working on some other things. Most likely a version of the Razor Crest that I mentioned. I'll also be working on the larger 18-inch Mandalorian to finish off this kit. So, all right. Thank you to all my new subscribers. Certainly go over and check out Augie Gonzalez at Interstellar Modeler. He does a fantastic job as well, and check out his builds. A lot of great inspiration I have gotten from watching his videos as well. So thank you again, and I will see you next time.